Welcome back to Tiny Blue Games. My name's of course Csaw or Chris, and today we're talking about MapleStory in 2020. Now, we are taking a bit of a break from comparing MMOs, and we are taking a trip down memory lane and continuing our MMORPG Nostalgia mission, I guess, if you will. The first episode of this was covering Fiesta Online. If you missed it, it's a ton of fun. You should check it out. But today we are taking a look at MapleStory, and this has a very special place in my heart because it was my first MMO. It's where I discovered the beauty of online worlds and what it could mean to a young kid, and it's a lot of fun. So we are going through the game. We are starting a new character because that's what I do whenever I come back to the game, because there's always a ton that has changed. And when I say come back, I mean I'm gonna level a character for a while and then leave again, because that's kind of the itch I always get in MapleStory, is to go through the leveling process for a little bit, and then I get to a point where I'm like, oh yeah, okay, and then I leave for a bit. And it's got a very similar sort of play style to like games like Black Desert Online, where I'll level the new class or whatever for a bit, and then I'll leave, and then I'll come back, and it's just how it happens. That being said, we aren't leveling a new class. We are going to one of the original explorers. Today we are going to be making a bowman, or at least an archer. I was in between bowman and crossbowman forever, because I really had an itch to play a bowman of some sort, an archer of some sort, and I wanted to try and have as many old style skills as possible, and I don't know, I settled on bowman, and hopefully it was the right choice. I got some old skills and some new skills, and we'll talk about those when we get to them, but first we had to go through the tutorial island, and we actually don't have to go through here. I just chose to. It's a really nice option, actually, that they do give you the two choices now. The downside is, of course, that we don't start in a maple leaf jumpsuit anymore, and go through this sort of like instructional period where we get to see all of the different classes in action. I really enjoyed that boot camp. This rendition is nice. It's maybe a little bit more to the point, but I do like so much of old school MapleStory. And when I say old school MapleStory, I'm always talking about kind of a pre-Big Bang MapleStory. That's kind of the cutoff point for me. But yeah, so we got lots of different things, but the big change, and I don't even think this was that new, is that there was like a huge cutscene when I was leaving the island, and it really caught me off guard because, yeah, I don't know, it's a lot more flashy and fast-paced than most MapleStory cutscenes I've seen in my day. It was pretty cool though, so it really gets you pumped up, and it does focus on the original classes as well as some of the new ones, but you do get a very cool scene with a lot of the new original ones. So we have our bowman there, and then we have our pirate. Very cool. Not technically the original, but I count pirates as part of the explorers, the original. I mean, they were added before the Big Bang. That's what I'm trying to get to. And then we have all of our newer classes. And there's so many classes in MapleStory now. It's actually crazy how many they've added. I remember when pirates were getting added, and it was the first time they'd ever added a class, and it was just crazy. Like, people were didn't really know what to think, because it's something that hadn't been done before. And I just remember so many people were lined up near the starting zone for the pirates, like, wanting to check out the town. Obviously, people made a bunch of pirates when they came out, like you'd see them everywhere. And it was just a really good time. And what I think particularly was interesting is that, if anything, when the pirates came out, they were kind of underpowered for a bit, which is very reverse to what a lot of games do with their new classes, that they'll make the new class a little bit more overpowered and everyone will want to do it. It'll be engaging. But this is funny. I love how there was like a really cinematic cutscene and then just like kind of the crappiest cutscene ever right afterwards. But yeah, sorry, to my point, I find it very interesting that MapleStory kind of went the other way with the pirates, where they were quite weak, especially low levels, and I think that really was an interesting choice. I don't know if it was an actual decision that they made beforehand, but I think it played out well, making the pirates really feel like they belonged in the explorers instead of feeling like all of the kind of more powerful classes that came after. Because a lot of the issues that I think, at least that I experienced with MapleStory, is that the new classes would always be so powerful, and then they'd have to go and rebuff the old classes, and they would start not feeling like, you know, how the classes are supposed to feel, but they would be more balanced. But you're kind of giving up what the class's theme is for balance, and it gets to be a really messy situation. So anyways, we are off the tutorial island. We made a bowman. We are hunting green mushrooms. Life is good. This is my childhood right here. Just, you know, level 20, killing mushrooms. The amount of times I got to that point on a character was tremendous, you know, compared to the amount of times I actually got anywhere significant. I think my highest level character, you know, on a legitimate old school server back in the day probably would have been something like 50, like something really not impressive at all by today's standards. But back in the day, it took me like forever to get the 50. Like, I didn't grind out efficiently. I wasn't like min-maxing or anything like that. I was just playing with friends, but it probably took me over, you know, a year and a bit to get to that point. And it was such a fun journey. It was really something else. And there was so many little personality choices you could have of your character. And I'm not just talking about NX cash and a cool haircut, but even for, like, you know, for an assassin, and that's what my old character used to be. An assassin could be, you know, regular stats, or they could be dexless, or you could be a bandit, or you could be a syndit, where you'd be like an assassin until 30 and then you'd become a bandit. There was so many different ways that you could, you know, build your character out to make sense. You could HP wash, you could not HP wash. That's definitely something I didn't really know about back when I was a kid, but it was a big part of MapleStory for people back in the day, that were trying to really min-max their characters, where they would put a bunch of int gear on their characters that didn't need int, and they would get a bunch of MP, and it would be, you know, it was a glitch. It was a bug in the game that was never really addressed because, hey, it probably made Nexon money, so they kind of wanted it there. But it was a really weird situation. Yeah, so there are some good things that have come. Like, I'm glad that certain things like that are gone. I'm glad that there is a little bit of balance when it comes to how efficient it was to grind on mages, and how mages would often sell leech, and a lot of high-level players would just kind of be grinded by someone else while they paid for it, which kind of removed some of the fun of the game for sure. The issue now, though, is that we've gotten to a point where it is such a solo game. Like, people are just playing by themselves, and the amount of people, like, the only time I've seen people while I was leveling this character was times when I would see them in a grinding spot that the leveling guide would bring me to, and I would just change channel, or they would change channel. Like, that's the only interactions I've had. Now, granted, I didn't go out of my way to really find those interactions, though actually I did. I went to what is technically, I guess, their party quest hub now, and first off, you have to be really high level to do party quests for some reason. I assume it's because you go through low levels so quickly that, you know, they kind of want to put the party quest at a point where you're going to be there for a while. But it feels really weird that you would have the start of your game be so focused on solitary play. Whereas before in MapleStory, pretty much from the get-go, you would see people, you might party with them, and, you know, start doing party quests as soon as you could. I remember specifically the Kerman City party quest that you could do at level 20 was a pretty high point in any beginner's journey, because before then, specifically between like 15 and 20, things would get pretty slow already, and you'd really be itching some kind of interaction with players. You'd be looking to do something more exciting, and then party quests were that thing, because even if it was boring, even if it was the same thing over and over again, you were still talking to people, making jokes. Maybe you were failing, maybe you had really good luck with some of the drops, and you could kind of brag to people. You were finding parties, you were trying to get into parties, you were trying to get into specific channels. There was just so much to do, and it felt really, really good because of that. Whereas right now, it's like, okay, I just go from one point on this this guide to the next. And often I find, like, when I've done this in the past, I'd go to these new theme dungeons, and this time I was really trying to find something that wasn't a theme dungeon, because I wanted to do some old school grinding. And I appreciate that you do grind at like golems and stuff like that, but it's so much easier to go to some of these new places because it teleports you right to the actual training map, and that's such an efficient way to level, right? Like, if you can just go to Gold Beach and you are on the map with the quest right beside you, you're probably going to choose that. And what was nice back in the day when you didn't have the option to just instant teleport places is that you would walk and you would look, you'd explore more. There was a sense of exploration, and to be fair, there was definitely a lot of people who'd look up online or like watch videos about where to go and grind, but even getting to those places would be more of a journey. So for instance, if the quest helper, instead of teleporting you to all these places, just put the arrow above your head and said, hey, I'm gonna help you navigate to where you should be fighting, yes, it would be a little bit more tedious to walk there, but you would feel like the world was a lot bigger. Because I think that's one of the weirdest parts as a returning Mapler, is that despite the fact that there's been a tremendous amount of new areas added and the game's never actually been bigger, the game feels a lot smaller because you use this UI to just teleport you to different places. And some of them are great. Some of them are very old school, like the Wraiths I really enjoyed because it was, a very classic place, and it might have been a little bit slower XP, but I definitely felt like I was, training in an old school map against old school monsters, which is really fun. But yeah, so it would take a little bit longer to get places, but it would feel really good once you did get there, and you would train there for a bit more. And I think more than anything, instead of doing the same thing on each character, like, I think there's probably a lot of people that just do the same training places on each character every time. You'd have a bit more flexibility in terms of where you go. The other thing that plays to that is that the classes themselves used to feel very different from one another. Whereas now everyone has some very similar skills. For instance, everyone has a sort of flash jump or speed up, whereas back in the day, only magicians got teleport at level 30 and assassins got flash jump at level 70. That was it. You had the haste from assassins, which was a huge buff back, when you were level 30 and everyone was slow. It felt so good to actually have some speed, specifically on like a warrior or something like that. So it's unfortunate because a lot of the classes feel more similar to each other. And I get where they did this because it balances the classes. Because back in the day, yeah, there was a big issue where some of the classes were quite weak. And some classes were just a lot easier to level or a lot easier to boss on. And to some degree, obviously that's always going to be the point. There's always going to be some imbalance in some classes that are better 1 month or 1 year than another. But having them all feel very similar takes away from some of the RPG of the MMO. For instance, hunters used to be really, really bad at close range. Now I actually kind of flash jump into people to kill quicker. Like I fight pretty much the same way a bandit or something would fight. I just have a bow. And yeah, I do have some range, and like I can fight just as easily from range, but there's no true negative aspect for me being closer, which I think is a very unfortunate thing. What I do like is that I was able to find some gear that looked very similar. Particularly, I have my hat that's really cool. I unfortunately still only have a level 30 bow. I tried looking for the free market and I didn't find it. I did find the auction house, but everything was super expensive. So I don't think a lot of people buy just basic equipments. And I wasn't able to find, or at least it wasn't convenient to find just a regular vendor. I also have a lot of rewards that will unlock at 100, I believe, that give me some better weapons. So we're kind of just going with the level 30 bow right now, and just decorating ourselves with anything we find, which I guess I will give the game is one of the cooler, aspects that I think is lost a lot in MMOs is that, it actually feels cool when you find something that's pretty good for you from a creature. The issue is that I don't really know where anything drops. So we're just, if we get lucky and find something, we're going to put it on, and that's pretty much it. But yeah, so we came here to the Skeledogs. These actually are a, old school map as well, and they look fairly similar. They might have had some changes, but I also didn't fight here as much back in the day, so I don't really know. A big change, though, was fighting Zakum solo at level, level 60, which is crazy, because this was such a hard boss back in old school. You'd have to wait till you were probably like 135 to start fighting him, like to actually do damage, and you'd need a party of at least 4 or 6 people. You could, of course, buy a Zac helmet by paying a bunch of money, doing the pre-quests, and then being brought into the Zakum raid and just sort of standing in the corner and healing up. So that's how a lot of people would get their Zac helms early on, but you would never fight him. Like you would, never kill him, get a bunch of levels, and get a Zac helm. And it felt so weird getting my Zac helm like this. Like it was just, the Zac helm was such a revered item back in the day, and it was so powerful. And this one was 65 attack increase, which, to be fair, I really like the fact that the game does highlight very simply how good an item is for you. Like, I think that's really cool. I just wish that certain items like the Zac helm were still very special. And I'm sure there are ones at end game, from new bosses that are very cool and more special to get. It's sad as someone who saw Zakum as such a challenging boss to see him so weak. But I do also know that there are hard modes of him, and I'm just not sure if the helmet itself looks different with those hard modes, or if it's the same helmet just with some different stats, which, would be cool that there's different stats as well, but it's what it is. So we are here at the, I actually forget what these guys are called. We're going to call them little devil dogs, though. And we did find one of the original bosses I remember going against. This one was back in old school, and I played as well. And what I liked about it is that it was actually a pretty tough boss to kill. In a lot of ways, this random field boss, though it didn't take quite as long as the Zac run did, wasn't much less difficult. Like, it was comparable. It gave me less experience and it didn't give me anything special, but it was cool to stumble upon it. And I don't specifically remember, but I think a lot of the maps around here haven't changed a ton. There's a lot of jumping pads and stuff like that. Certainly this Roids map feels very similar, where I think the levels of the creatures have changed, because I think this used to be more of like a level 60 area, and now it's a level 95 area. It's weird actually seeing some of them. I think the most jarring ones is like seeing Ludibrium, the teddy bears. Like the first time you go there is like level 100 and something, and I'm like, this is where I used to grind at level 30. And I think it makes a lot of sense in some perspective, because they really want a linear way of going through the world where, these different continents are going to have different leveled monsters. Whereas back in the day in MapleStory, there would be like 5 different maps in 5 different continents that would have kind of the 20 to 30 monsters that you could go fight at. And I think that was confusing, but also nice, because it did offer that variety. Whereas now I think there's a very linear progress that you go through the map, where you're going to start at like green mushrooms, you're going to go to golems, and then gold beach, and then maybe to dungeon and do those copper drakes or whatever. Like, it's a very linear thing now. Whereas back in the day, you'd get to 20 or 25, you'd be like, do I want to go to zombie mushrooms? Do I want to go to the desert? Do I want to go to the teddy bears? Like, some of them were very far to get to and didn't make a ton of sense, but it was a choice. It was also interesting killing these higher level creatures, because they actually don't reward you with more experience, which I found very interesting. But I did have a lot of fun, because I found a few places that did really bring back the nostalgia, and it's just a fun game to jump in for a bit and enjoy. It's interesting to see how well it has changed itself over the years, and has been able to maintain like the small portion of the MMO community that it really caters to. And I think that's the big thing here, is that it knows what it does. Like, MapleStory knows what it's trying to provide people, and it focuses on that. But yeah, so hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you do have a suggestion for another old school MMO that we should check out, let me know. If you played MapleStory yourself, I'd love to hear what class you played back in the day, or if you still play now, what class do you play now? But thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next video.